Welcome to the next module. In this module, we will be studying about chemical and climate stressors. So there are lots of challenges we are facing. This Arctic environment is basically undergoing rapid and unprecedented environmental changes that we have seen about the Arctic amplification. There are three main interrelated issues that are affecting them. One is the climate change. Next one is changes in the biological diversity. And the third one is accumulation of toxic substances. In the previous modules, we studied about various pollutants. The anthropogenic stressors are threatening the resilience of Arctic ecosystems both individually and through complex interactions. So these are called the stressors. Stressors means they put a lot of pressure on the system. The transboundary nature of these stressors, transboundary means they are actually across various regions. It is not about pertaining to only one particular region. That means their boundaries are like multiple. The challenges exist in the governance systems which are often sector based and issue specific. So the current governance systems what is being used in the Arctic are not equipped to address or reduce these interacting and systemic stressors. So we need to identify the causal relationship that is existing in multiple stressor interactions, which is often very difficult to carry out with significant uncertainty involved. Even if we figure it out, there are some uncertainty involved in it. Let us move on to the most important title for this particular module, which is chemical and climate stressors. So what are climate stressors? These are any harmful substance or chemical compound that negatively impact the health of organisms, ecosystems or the environment. So they all put together called as the chemical stressor. That means they should be of chemical origin. These stressors can come in the form of pollutants, heavy metals, pesticides or other chemicals that disrupt natural processes. In the previous module, we had seen about microplastic, nanoplastics and other things. They also belong to this particular category and can cause damage to living beings and their habitats. A climate stressor is any factor that is related to climate change that negatively affect the environment, ecosystem or living organism. So based on which one affects, it is called either a chemical stressor or a climate stressor. They include changes in the rising temperature, which is called Arctic amplification, altered precipitation patterns, melting of ice and extreme weather events like forest fire and other things that can disrupt the natural process and threaten biodiversity. So these are the two major chemical and climate stressors. So how do we know a particular thing, a particular chemical is a chemical stressor? So here is a chart diagram which talks about how we can actually identify them. First, we have to define a particular study area. Then what we do is we collect environmental data or samples. Then identify potential sources of chemicals. So from where they would have come, that is the next thing we will do. Then we analyze the samples, example ice, sediment or water. Then conduct some chemical testing. Then we determine the presence of harmful chemicals. Then we assess the concentration levels. Then we evaluate the toxicity using bioassays or literature references. Then we identify affected ecosystems or species, and then finally we report the findings and implications. This is the overall process. Let us look into each one step. So what is called define the Arctic study area? So what is that and how do we do that? We have to identify specific geographical region in the Arctic, maybe a tundra or a marine area or permafrost region. Like that we have to identify that area. Then we have to consider the logistical challenge related to accessibility and extreme weather condition. This is one of the very crucial fact because most of the Arctic during the winter is frozen. So reaching some of the places is going to be extremely difficult. So we have to think about the logistical challenges what we will have because we are going to collect water or other samples to see whether they have any chemical contaminants. So for that we have to focus more on the logistical challenges. The second one is collect environmental data specific to Arctic conditions. So we gather existing data that is relevant to Arctic ecosystems like ice cover, wildlife migration patterns, and historical pollution data. So these are all the things we can do. But how do we do that? We can currently we can use satellite imagery and local observation to understand what are the environmental changes that are happening. Then we identify the potential sources of chemicals in the Arctic. So how do we do that? We assess the potential sources like oil and gas exploration, shipping routes, mining, and military activities. So we have to consider the long range transport of pollutant. This is what we have seen. Air and water phase are the two major areas where lots of pollutants come from outside of the Arctic. So that also we have to keep in mind. And from the industrialized area also we have to consider. Then how do we analyze the sample? Basically the ice, sediment or the water. We have to collect the sample from the diverse Arctic environment, and then we have to do specialized techniques to handle and analyze these samples. We have to consider the cold temperature and preservation needs, because during the transportation of the sample or other things, if there is some chemical changes taking place, then we may be under the wrong impression that those changes had actually occurred in the Arctic region itself, but it had actually happened during the transportation. So to reduce that, what we have to do is we have to store the sample at a low temperature so that these kind of chemical reactions are either slowed down or does not take place. And then conduct chemical testing. What are the things? We have to use laboratory methods suitable for low concentration, because many of the pollutants what we are going to study are having in a very small quantities, like many times they are in the nanogram levels or at ppb level, that is parts per billion level. So these low concentration contaminants are generally found in the Arctic region. We have to find out the methodologies for detecting the persistent organic pollutants and heavy metals that accumulate in the cold environment. So we have to be very specific in identifying the tools and techniques what we are going to employ. Then determine the presence of harmful chemicals. So we identify harmful chemicals especially related to Arctic ecosystems, including the legacy pollutants and emerging contaminants. Then we assess the concentration levels. So compare the chemical concentration to the safety threshold set by Arctic specific guidelines and international regulations. Then we consider regional differences in sensitivity and vulnerability in the ecosystem. Then finally we evaluate the toxicity. We do bioassays and other things. So here we conduct toxicity assessment like fish and invertebrates, and we carry out lots of bioassays. We compare the obtained data with the existing data to see what is the potential impact on the native species. Then once we know exactly some particular area is affected, that is how we say identify the affected areas. So maybe it is a marine area or freshwater terrestrial area, or it may be species like polar bear, seals, migratory bird or something. So what are impacted, we need to identify them and then assess the ecological importance of affected species and their roles in the food web. Then finally we report the finding to the larger public, especially to other scientists and other people, policy makers, so that they know this problem exists and how to address this problem. They can take policy decisions. So we communicate the results to indigenous communities because they live in that region. They need to know what are the changes happening, what are the chemicals or the pollutants are reaching their area. They need to know because they have to modify their food consumption based on the chemical contaminants. Then we have to inform the policymakers and environmental organizations, highlighting the impact on the health and livelihood of the people. Then we need to discuss some adaptive management strategies to reduce or mitigate these kind of pollutions. So here are the various category of pollutants that chemical stressors are given here. One is a persistent organic pollutant. This is the most important one. DTT, PCBs, that is polychlorinated biphenyl, HCB, that is hexachlorobenzene, dioxins and furan. All these are chemicals which are existing in the Arctic region. They are called as persistent organic pollutants. Then we have heavy metals like mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic and other metals. Nutrients are also, some of the nutrients are pollutants, that is nitrate, ammonium and phosphate ions. Then microplastics we already had seen. Hydrocarbons like methane is a greenhouse gas. And additional greenhouse gas include carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide and SF6 and etc. Then we also have another major problem which is less studied is a black carbon or a soot. The carbonaceous particles from incomplete combustion of fossil fuels and biomass is these type of compounds. Then ozone, volatile organic compounds, invasive species and pathogens, salinity and temperature changes. All these things we will have to understand. And what are the changes in the chemical stressors? For example, if you take the heavy metal, the mercury concentration is up to 0.5 milligram per kg in the fish is the acceptable thing. That is what is actually changing, we are seeing. So if there is an increase in up to 0.5 milligram per kg in fish, let us say the mercury concentration increases. So what will it give? It poses risk to wildlife and human health. And lead and cadmium is up to 5 microgram, not milligram. It is at a very low level, microgram, and cadmium up to 0.2 microgram are the compounds of concern, and they are indicative of industrial pollutions. And when we talk about POPs, that is persistent organic pollutants, marine mammals and atmospheric POPs are given in different values. So high level of POP, that is polychlorinated biphenyl, is seen in the Arctic region, which is one of the chemical stressor. And the atmospheric POP is mainly hexachlorobenzene, which is detected in Arctic samples. Similarly, when we talk about microplastic, there are two major areas. One is the sea ice, which has it, and the other one is the sediments. So both of them have lots of microplastics. So this leads to identification of plastic contamination, and the sediments are mainly microplastic in sediment is mainly found in coastal sediments. So we saw the chemical stressors. Now we move on to climate stressors. So here the temperature change, sea ice decline, ocean acidification, precipitation changes are the major climate stressors. So temperature change, what is happening? Actually, the increase of about 2.2 degrees centigrade over the last century is the one which is happening. And similarly, permafrost thaw is the next major change happens because of the temperature change. The sea ice decline is around 40% of the ice had declined in the Arctic region from 1970s, and the thickness also had reduced from about 3 meters to 1.5 meters. And ocean acidification, we had earlier seen the pH had dropped from 8.2 to 7.9 in some of the areas, but overall the drop is from 8.2 to 8.1. And when we talk about the precipitation changes, there is an increased precipitation. See, Arctic is a region which is a very cold region. So there snow is the most common thing. But when precipitation happens, that means the temperature is higher. So that is a real climate stressor. When the water falls on the ice, it starts melting more. So that is why it is a positive feedback.